Marriage and Family Overview, Family Therapy, the Gladding Ch, Chapter 13, working with culturally diverse families. One caveat is that if you only put on cultural competency when someone has different hair texture or skin color than you are, your clients will know. Cultural minorities tend to understand very quickly if someone in the person of the therapist is culturally skilled and interested in helping them as an individual, a human being, versus someone who is just doing what they think is required. Knowing that every client and every family is multicultural. All marriages, to a degree, are cultural intermarriages. No family, no individual shares the same cultural roots as we do as individuals. The cultural continuum, age, sex, gender, race, culture, ethnicity, disability, ability, faith system. Thinking about Jews, Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Italians, Haitians, Poles, Ukrainians, Irish, Koreans, Nigerians, Cubans, Vietnamese, Mexicans, Native Americans, Hispanics, Asians, African Americans, and Caucasians. And even among Caucasian people, the European roots are considerably different. We have much to learn, much to accept. We celebrate diversity and we celebrate similarities. So what is culture? The definition. Defined in numerous ways, the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of racial, religious, and social groups, encompassing the collective realities of a group of people. They may differ in regard to race, religion, or social status, but identify themselves collectively: Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Egyptian, Japanese, Kenyan, Indian. And with understanding that in our country, we're a culturally diverse country by definition. Cultural values define behaviors and establish norms for attitudes and behaviors within families. Racial groups and ethnicities are not so broadly defined. Racial groups, a family or tribe, people, nation belonging to the same stock. Race is primarily a biological term. Ethnic groups are large groups of people classed according to common racial, national, tribal, linguistic, cultural origin, or background. Ethnic identity, anything but homogeneous. Ethnicity refers to a sociological concept. Dynamics associated with culturally diverse families, qualitative and quantitative. Looking at the way that we understand ourselves and how we understand our family, our appearance, whether we have access to mental health services or we're underrepresented, underserved, covert and overt criticism of their patterns of family interactions, and lack of universal acceptance to be culturally diverse. How we respond and view life. Looking at institutional barriers, a language barrier, a financial barrier, an economic barrier, a social faith barrier, whether or not we feel we can access services. Issues within culturally diverse families. Sensitivity, whether our counselor is culturally encapsulated, insensitive, who treats everyone the same and says, I don't see color. Quite offensive not to see someone for who they are. The experience of the counselor, if they've been able to have experiences in their personal and professional life with different cultures across the cultural continuum. Sexual orientation, the LGBT continuum comes into play here. Acceptance, knowing that all people are worthy of respect and dignity. Ingenuity, having some kind of frame to have a direct, open collaboration, not only with families that are culturally diverse, but being able to access community resources for that. Table 13.1, cultural value preferences of middle-class white Americans and ethnic minorities, which is a comparative summary. Specificity, that each family is unique and treated differently and not simply treated within their cultural or racial or ethnic group, and looking for interventions that are culturally diverse in nature. Approaches for treating culturally diverse families, gay and lesbian families, same-sex families, looking at the research, looking at the invisibility, the intergenerational patterns, the stages that these families go through to be understood, and how that there is no typical LGBT family, and the understanding that there has been a lack of affirming role models and social support, a great deal of discrimination. Therapeutic treatment of gay and lesbian families, acceptance, looking at family origins, looking at community resources, and diversity of cultures and subcultures within that group. African American families were the largest minority group in the United States, according to Sue and Sue, 1999, have been replaced now by the Hispanic families, looking at roles, rules, strengths, the negative interactions, some of the male-female relationships, the aspect of slavery, of poverty, of racism, prejudice, and discrimination, some of the changes in their women's movement, and changes in housing and access to resources. The high degree of incarceration experienced by black males, and the dropout rate, looking at external factors that create stressors for their family dynamics. Looking at the treatment, understanding that there has to be an approach that is a multi-generational family systemic approach in order to look at the extended family and community family, looking at parental rights and addressing social and institutional and spiritual resources and issues. Asian families. 4% of the United States, 10.5 million people in the United States are Asian. Traditionally, those families do not seek resources outside of their own communities. A patriarchal society, moving somewhat more toward democratic. Looking at how to orient them in therapy to the value of therapy, establishing rapport quickly through compassion and self-disclosure, specific attempts to improve relationships and resolve problems. Understanding that Asian families sometimes look at the therapist as an expert. Intergenerational conflicts, role confusion, couple relationships, and some acculturation issues between natives and children that are then born as and Americanized with that. Hispanic and Latino families, a higher unemployment rate than non-Hispanic Latinos, live before the poverty line over twice the rate, lag behind in completing higher education, high school, and college. Looking at issues of dignity, pride, self-reliance, trust and intimacy, respect. Treating those families, looking at education and occupational issues, acculturation issues between members of different generations, looking at their outside resources and internal beliefs, typically Catholic, the patriarchal dominance issue of the father or the grandparent, and the language barrier, having access to interpreters and being open to large family groups coming into session. Native Americans, Eskimos, Aleutians, very unlikely to seek assistance outside of their own group, have been very negatively affected by historical practices, discrimination, decimation of culture, as well as the different tribes, creating a lack of cohesiveness among Native Americans, looking at home-based therapy, storytelling, structural family therapy, traditional healing models. And even in the book on Native Americans has much less information than any other group. And having a visual mode, always the common factors: warmth, empathy, acceptance, unconditional positive regard, congruency, genuineness, immediacy, authenticity. All of these things should apply to working with all clients, but particularly clients that may perceive themselves to be coming in from a minority group. Looking at Sue and Sue, guidelines for successful treatment approaches and working with culturally diverse families. Identify human processes that are similar regardless of ethnicity or cultural backgrounds, with respect and openness to those differences. Looking at degree of acculturation, families whose children have become more Americanized, and what has been tried and preferred before accessing community and faith systems as helps as appropriate or as the family is interested. Role of the therapist to be aware and sensitive to their own cultural heritage, to value and respect differences, comfortable with differences, sensitive to different circumstances, biases, whatever stage that client may be in a racial, ethnic, developmental model, knowledge of our own racist attitudes, beliefs, and systems. Prejudice is a belief, and it cannot be legislated against. Discrimination is an act, and is against the law. Knowledge, awareness, and skills. Knowledge can be gained, awareness can be heightened, skills can be learned and attained. Sensitivity and respect is an innate issue to bring that cannot be taught. So, concurrently culturally sensitive, open to the families they work with, understanding diverse families and dealing with thoughts and emotions, help them acknowledge and celebrate their heritage, move through and adjust to family life in the healthiest way, and the acronym ESCAPE: engagement with the family and process, sensitivity to culture, awareness of family potential, knowledge of the environment. Initial phase of working with these families, establish rapport, have culturally diverse office decorations and reading material, respect the family hierarchy according to Minuchin structural and therapy, and become part of the therapeutic process. Then the middle phase is to have goal setting and to be able to work stressing family values, using reframing, bringing in extended members of the family, and celebrating the achievements and accomplishments through therapy. The conclusion of the summary table from 334 to 338 is there for you, and we will pick up with chapter 14.